A German shepherd is left behind on the side of the road when his family moves away. No one comes back. No one calls his name. But he doesn't stop. Across hundreds of miles, he travels through forests and unfamiliar cities, gets captured, escapes to save a girl from a burning car, just to find the place he once called home. But when he finally returns, the door he remembers is closed. No one is waiting. So why does he keep going? Where will he go now? And what truly defines home for a soul the world has forgotten? This isn't just the story of a dog. It's a journey through loyalty, loss, and the quiet, powerful truth that sometimes we only find ourselves when no one else remembers we're still out there. The morning had started with a strange kind of silence. Rusty could feel it in the way his boy hadn't tied his shoelaces the usual way, or how his father had barked hurried instructions without the playful whistle that usually followed. Boxes were stacked everywhere. The house smelled of dust, tape, and departure. Rusty, a sturdy German shepherd with sharp eyes and a coat that still gleamed in sunlight, paced back and forth near the garage, confused. He'd seen suitcases before, sure, but never like this. Not all at once, not with so many closed doors and such little eye contact. The boy Liam had tried to pat his head, but someone called him away. "Get in the car, we don't have time." Rusty's ears perked. Time? Didn't they always have time? Then the car door slammed. Engines roared, and the driveway emptied. Rusty waited. At first he assumed it was a mistake. Maybe they'd turned back around. Maybe they were grabbing something and would come back for him. He stayed exactly where he'd last seen Liam, under the gas station canopy, beside a red cooler. The heat from the pavement warmed his paws, but his eyes never blinked. He stared down the road like it owed him an explanation. Hours passed. The man behind the gas station counter tossed a bottle cap at him and muttered something under his breath. Rusty didn't move. Later, when a passing teen tried to lure him with beef jerky, Rusty took the food but stayed put. He didn't want food. He wanted home. Night fell, and with it came the realization that no tires were turning back. No door would open with a familiar voice calling his name. The canopy lights buzzed above him. A moth circled. Rusty finally curled into himself, his tail pressed to his ribs, and slept with one eye half open. The second day came with noise, cars, people, the smell of coffee and gasoline, but none of it mattered. The space where Liam had stood now held only echoes. A stranger placed a bowl of water near him. Rusty drank it and wagged his tail once out of habit, but the joy was missing. By the third day, the sun had started to blister the sidewalk. Rusty's belly ached with emptiness. His paws, used to lawns and sidewalks, were now raw from concrete and glass shards. And still, the road stretched on, endless and uncaring. That evening, a freight truck pulled in. The rumble vibrated Rusty's chest as it idled, letting off clouds of diesel. The driver, a woman with freckles and tired eyes, stepped down and stared at him. "You lost, buddy?" she asked softly, tossing half a sandwich toward him. Rusty caught it midair without thinking. She chuckled, shook her head, and climbed back into the cab. The truck pulled away, and for the first time in days, Rusty stood up, really stood, ears forward, body aligned. Something in that moment clicked. The road, the direction, the scent in the air. He didn't know the name of the city where Liam had gone, but he remembered the forest they used to walk in together, the distant hills behind the neighborhood, the sound of trains. More importantly, he remembered the feeling of home. And something in his chest, something instinctual and ancient, pulled him forward. Rusty stepped off the curb, past the gas station, past the red cooler, past the place where he was forgotten. His shadow stretched behind him as if it, too, hesitated to follow. But Rusty didn't look back. The road was long. The world was wide. But his boy was out there somewhere. And Rusty had decided he was going home. The world beyond the gas station was louder than Rusty had expected. There were no fences, no familiar backyards, just open space that smelled like hot metal and engine oil, punctuated by sudden bursts of wind from passing trucks that made his ears twitch and his legs tense. But Rusty didn't pause. His gait was steady, driven not by confidence but by something deeper, the quiet ache of longing. The first town he reached was a tangle of cracked sidewalks and flickering neon signs. No grass, no trees, just concrete, smoke, and faces that moved too fast. He passed a group of teenagers outside a convenience store, laughing too loudly. One of them noticed him and called out, Hey, check it out, Stray. Looks like he thinks he's somebody's hero." They whistled, mocking. One threw a piece of bread at him. Another flinched as if to scare him. Rusty didn't growl. He didn't run. He just kept walking, his tail low but his head still lifted, not proud, but unwilling to be broken. Later that evening, in a narrow alley behind a grocery store, he found a broken crate to rest beside. The night air was sharp, laced with something burnt. A raccoon hissed at him from a dumpster, but Rusty didn't flinch. He was too tired, too sore. His paw pads had started to crack. The world felt harder beneath him now. He drifted into sleep, half alert, his ears twitching at every siren and passing footstep. Sometime before dawn, he was awakened by the sound of shuffling feet. An old man in a threadbare coat approached, dragging a shopping cart filled with cans, blankets, and plastic bags that rustled like dry leaves. The man stopped a few feet away and looked down at him. "Well, you look like hell," he mumbled. Rusty raised his head, didn't move. The man sat slowly on a milk crate, pulled a flattened sandwich from his pocket, and tore it in two. He tossed half to Rusty, who sniffed it cautiously. Cold turkey and stale bread. Still, Rusty ate it in 2 bites. The man chuckled. "Don't worry, I ain't got a home either." They sat in silence, the kind that only 2 lost creatures can share. Before leaving, the man reached into his coat and pulled out a patch of cloth, an old army badge, faded, torn at the edges. He looked at it, then at Rusty. "Used to have a shepherd like you, back when things were simpler. Loyal bastard saved my life once." He paused. "Guess that makes us even now." He tied the badge gently around Rusty's neck like a scarf, crooked and frayed. "You don't look like the kind that quits. Don't you quit, you hear?" When Rusty woke again, the man was gone. Just the badge remained. Rusty stood, paws aching, stomach hollow. But his body remembered the rhythm now. Walk, breathe, keep going. The sunrise ahead was dull and gray, but it was morning, and that meant another day closer. He crossed an overpass, dodged a line of honking cars, and entered a wooded area where birdsong returned, faint and cautious. His paws found soft earth again. He sniffed at bark and mud, chasing scents he couldn't place. The world was still wide, but this part felt more familiar. By midday, he found a small creek and drank deeply, his reflection rippling in the water, fur duller, frame leaner, but eyes still sharp. Later, while resting near a playground, he saw a woman dragging a child across the park. The child pointed at Rusty, mouth open. "Look, Mommy. A dog." The woman barely glanced. "Probably diseased. Leave it alone." Rusty lowered his head. Not in shame, in quiet understanding. Not all people had space in their hearts for dogs like him. But that was all right. He wasn't looking for all people. Just one. The sky had been growling all day. Clouds churned low and heavy above the rooftops like dark animals stalking the horizon. Rusty moved cautiously through the edge of a quiet suburb, where the streets were empty, and the wind carried the scent of rain and asphalt. His fur was damp already, the drizzle soaking into the thick ridges along his spine. Every step left a muddy print on the sidewalk. Then came the crack of thunder. Loud. Sharp. It shook the ground beneath him, and Rusty flinched, lowering his body close to the earth. Not out of fear, he had known thunder before, but because thunder reminded him of goodbyes, of doors slamming, of cars that never returned. As he passed the edge of a small neighborhood park, he saw her standing alone near a swing set, her back turned, hair tucked beneath a plastic yellow raincoat too big for her small frame. She was motionless, looking up at the sky as if daring it to cry harder. Rusty hesitated, then took a step closer. The girl turned. Their eyes met. She couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 11. Freckles on her cheeks, red boots caked in mud, a school backpack too soaked to hold shape. For a second, neither of them moved. Then, without a word, she kneeled in the wet grass and extended a hand. Rusty didn't run. Cautiously, he approached, ears half back, steps slow. The girl whispered something he couldn't understand, but her voice was soft like Liam's when he used to read aloud under the covers, thinking no one was listening. Rusty stopped just short of her hand. She let it stay there, still and waiting. When he finally brushed his nose against her fingers, her breath caught in her throat like she'd been holding it for hours. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. She slipped off her backpack and pulled out a half-smashed sandwich, wrapping torn open. "It's peanut butter," she offered. "I don't like it. You can have it." Rusty took it gently, chewing slow, watching her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Do you even have one?" He blinked. She smiled, then whispered, "Mine's Clara." Lightning struck nearby. The wind howled. Clara looked up, then around. The park was empty, and she was clearly not supposed to be there. She stood quickly, slung her bag over her shoulder, and looked down at Rusty, eyes wide with sudden urgency. "Come on," she said, "before Mom finds out I ran away again." Rusty followed. They cut across yards and fences, through a back alley, and into the narrow gap between two buildings where a rusted garden shed stood forgotten. Clara pushed open the door with effort, revealing a clutter of paint cans and old bicycles. She pulled a towel from a shelf and began drying Rusty's fur as best she could. "You're warm," she murmured. "That's nice. Everything's so cold lately." Rusty didn't move. He lay down, head resting gently on her rain boot. She smiled at that, really smiled, and leaned against him. "I used to have a dog," she whispered, almost like a confession. "But he ran away. Or maybe someone made him leave." Her voice wavered. "Sometimes I feel like that dog, like I'm not supposed to be here." Rusty blinked slowly, then lifted his head and gently nudged her arm. She laughed through her tears and rubbed his ear. They stayed like that until the storm passed. No thunder, no yelling, just breathing. Eventually, a woman's voice called in the distance. Clara froze. "I have to go," she whispered. "If they find you, they'll take you away." She reached into her backpack, pulled out a red ribbon from a broken hair tie, and tied it loosely around Rusty's neck beneath the frayed army badge. "So I'll know you're mine, even if they don't." Then she opened the shed door and whispered, "Stay. Please, just for tonight." Rusty wanted to. He wanted to stay beside the one soul who saw him not as danger or burden but as comfort. But before morning came, men with flashlights and uniforms arrived. Clara's parents, the neighbor. Someone must have seen. Rusty ran. He didn't fight, didn't growl, just ran. From the voices. From the hands. From the good thing he wasn't allowed to keep. And behind him, Clara's voice shattered the quiet. I didn't want him to go. He wasn't a stray. He wasn't. But by the time the words reached the street, Rusty was already gone, the ribbon fluttering at his throat, like the memory of a hug that came too late. The world smelled different now, like bleach, metal, and fear. Rusty lay curled in the corner of a wire kennel, the cold seeping through the thin steel floor into his ribs. Around him, dogs barked in a maddening chorus, high, desperate yelps, low guttural growls, the sound of paws scraping against bars and bowls clattering on concrete. But Rusty was silent, watching. He didn't remember the van ride. He remembered men with nets, a catchpole tightening around his neck, Clara's voice echoing down the alley as he was dragged away. Then cold. Then darkness. The shelter workers moved quickly, impersonally. They gave him a number. No name, just a white tag clipped to the cage with 3 digits. One of them remarked, "Too old to adopt. Too big to risk. We'll hold him for 72 hours. Then assessment." Rusty didn't know what assessment meant, but he knew enough to understand that no one in this place looked toward tomorrow with hope. Time was measured by meals, if there were any, or by how often your cage was hosed down. On the second day, a boy and his mother stopped at his kennel. The boy's face lit up, pointing. "He looks like the one from the news, the dog that saved the girl in the snowstorm." But the mother shook her head. "That one had a white paw. This one doesn't. Besides, he's a stray." The boy looked back once before they walked on. Rusty stared at the wall. Later that evening, when the barking faded into exhausted whimpers, a young shelter volunteer approached. She had kind eyes and crouched low, sliding a piece of jerky through the bars. "Hi there," she whispered. "Someone tied a ribbon to your collar." "That's not nothing." Rusty sniffed the treat but didn't take it. Not out of mistrust, just the weight of stillness. She stayed for a few minutes, humming a song too old for her age, before moving on. The night was long. The fluorescent lights flickered and hummed. The scent of wet fur and sadness lingered. But Rusty's body was healing. Slowly. The cuts from the briar patch, the bruise along his hip, the cracked paw he had known worse. What truly hurt was the quiet. He didn't belong here. He wasn't finished. Sometime near dawn, a technician came by with a clipboard and stopped in front of his cage. Assessment delayed. Overcrowded, moving him to the lower hall. They opened the gate. Rusty didn't resist, didn't growl, just walked slowly, limping, ears half back but alert. They put him in a transport crate plastic, with a steel door and no view but the floor. As the wheels of the cart echoed down the corridor, Rusty caught a single glimpse through a hallway window. Rain. Wet pavement. Wind. A chain-link gate half open near the rear of the lot. And something sparked. It wasn't a plan, not yet. But it was a direction. When the crate was placed in the staging area, one of the workers forgot to lock the door fully. It clicked, but not all the way. No one noticed. Rusty waited. He waited through the shouting in the next room, through the thunder rolling outside, through the slow drip of rainwater from a pipe in the corner. And then, when the hallway lights flickered and the night shift turned their back, he nudged. Click. The latch gave. Rusty didn't bolt. He moved like a shadow, low, silent, strategic. Past the sleeping bulldog, past the mop bucket, past the broken vending machine humming near the side door. The main gate was locked, but the storage room window wasn't latched properly. He pushed against the frame once, twice. A third time. It opened. The outside air hit his face like a wave. Wet, cold, alive. He climbed through, dropped to the gravel, and limped toward the fence. Then the siren sounded. Shouts followed. Flashlights cut through the dark. But Rusty was already gone through a gap beneath the gate where the rain had washed away the soil. Someone yelled, "Stop that dog." But by then, he was nothing more than a streak of black and gold in the night. Running. Not from fear, but toward something that still lived in his bones. Freedom. And whatever home was, he hadn't reached it yet. By the time Rusty reached the tree line, his body was no longer moving, it was surviving. Every step was driven by muscle memory, not will. His legs trembled from the miles, his lungs burned from the cold, and the gash on his hind leg had reopened. Blood mixed with rain, leaving a faint trail through the pine needles behind him. He didn't remember collapsing. Only the sound of thunder again, the whisper of wind, the smell of wood smoke nearby, and then black. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a ceiling made of old wooden planks, cracked, weather-worn. The second thing he noticed was warmth beneath him, a blanket folded beneath his body, and a fire crackling low in a stone hearth. Then he heard the footsteps. Slow, heavy, limping. A man appeared in the doorway of the room. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Gray beard, hard eyes, one leg wrapped in a metal brace that clanked slightly as he moved. He wore an old army jacket, the kind that had seen both deserts and frost. "You're awake," the man said, voice low and rough like gravel. Rusty tried to lift his head, but the pain made him flinch. "Don't bother," the man continued, setting a bowl of water beside him. "You passed out just past my fence, dragged yourself through thorn and mud like some kind of stubborn ghost." Rusty blinked. The man crouched slowly, carefully, and placed something else near the fire, a small bowl of shredded meat, still warm. "I ain't asking questions," he muttered. "I don't care if you were born in a barn or broke out of a cage. I've seen worse things crawl into this forest." Rusty didn't move. The man tilted his head, German Shepherd. Strong build. Not feral. You had training. He gestured toward the collar around Rusty's neck, now soaked and worn. The frayed army badge was still there, tangled with Clara's ribbon, faded from the rain. Funny, the man whispered. I had a dog once. Atlas. Served with me overseas. Smartest damn animal I ever knew. Took a bullet meant for me, and still took down a hostile before he dropped. He stared into the fire for a long time. Didn't speak. Rusty watched the man, every instinct alert but not afraid. There was no threat here, only silence. And something else. A weight the man carried in his chest, familiar to Rusty, the weight of being left behind. You can stay, the man said finally. I don't get many visitors. Just don't expect table scraps unless you earn them. Rusty closed his eyes again. He stayed 3 days. The man never asked for affection, never gave commands, but each day he set out food and water, let Rusty sleep by the fire, wrapped his injured leg in cloth soaked in salt water, spoke only when the silence grew too loud. On the second day, Rusty limped outside and lay on the porch. The man joined him with a cup of black coffee. Together they watched the tree line sway in the wind. No one visits this place, the man said. No one remembers the people who don't come back. Rusty rested his head on the man's boot. The man didn't move. On the fourth morning, Rusty stood up on his own. He paced near the edge of the woods, ears forward, nose testing the wind. The pain was duller now, the limp still there but manageable. The man watched from the doorway, arms crossed. You leaving? Mine? Rusty turned slightly. The man gave a tired smile. Didn't think so. Then he stepped aside, just a little, and said softly, doors never locked. In case you get tired of chasing ghosts. Rusty paused. He looked at the forest, then at the porch, then back again. And without a sound, he vanished into the trees, a shadow reborn, quieter now, but still moving forward. Because something inside him had begun to remember. Not just Liam's voice or Clara's touch, but what it felt like to matter. And that feeling, however fleeting, was enough to keep going. The air was sharp with frost and smoke. Rusty emerged from the forest just as twilight gave way to a thin, silver night. The world felt hushed, like it was holding its breath. A 2-lane highway cut through the open fields ahead, its yellow lines glowing faintly under the distant halo of street lamps. Wind pushed against Rusty's coat, carrying with it the scent of fuel, rubber, and something else, urgency. His limp had lessened. His stride was slower, more deliberate now. But there was something in the way he walked, a quiet purpose, like a compass locked to an unseen pull. He reached the edge of the shoulder and paused. The asphalt was still warm from the day's sun. He sniffed the air once, then lowered his head and began to cross. That's when the scream pierced the silence. High-pitched, young, terrified. Tires screeched. Rusty froze. A sedan had lost control on the icy bend just ahead, its headlights spinning wildly as it veered off the road and into the slope beside it. Metal crunched against a tree. Glass exploded outward like falling stars. Steam rose from the hood as the engine hissed, then a heartbeat of silence. And then the scream again. Rusty ran. Not toward safety. Not away from the wreck. Toward it. The grass was slick. Mud caked his paws as he slid down the embankment. The smell of antifreeze hit him hard, but he didn't flinch. He reached the crumpled car and circled, assessing. The driver's side was crushed. No movement. Then he saw her. The girl. No more than 16. Pinned in the back seat, one arm trapped under a twisted headrest. Her face was pale, lips quivering. Blood trickled from her temple. She was trying to push the door, but it wouldn't budge. Help, she whispered into the dark. Please, someone. Rusty barked. Once. Twice. Then he leapt at the door with his front paws. Scratched. Snapped at the handle. Nothing. He backed up. Looked around. The window. Without hesitation, he launched himself forward, ramming the side window with his shoulder. Once. Twice. On the third hit, the glass shattered. and a wave of freezing air rushed in. The girl gasped, turning toward the breach. Rusty climbed halfway into the wreck, licked her face once softly, then bit down on the loose strap of her jacket and pulled. She screamed, but didn't resist. He pulled again. The seatbelt loosened just enough. The girl twisted free, dragging herself toward the broken window. Rusty backed out, giving her space. She collapsed onto the ground outside the car, shivering, eyes wide with disbelief. Then came the spark. A flicker beneath the hood. A brief orange glow. "Move," Rusty growled, not in words but in action. He nudged her with his head, pushed her with his body. She crawled, then staggered to her feet, and together they limped away just as flames began licking the side of the vehicle. Moments later, the car burst into full fire. Headlights from another car illuminated the slope. A couple jumped out, yelling, phones out, dialing for help. One of them knelt beside the girl. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "He saved me," she whispered. "Who did?" "The dog. He was just gone." Rusty had already slipped into the shadows beyond the ditch, eyes reflecting light from the flames like twin embers. He stood still, watching. The red ribbon at his neck fluttered in the wind, stained now with soot and glass dust. The woman with the phone aimed her camera toward the wreck. For a second, she caught a glimpse of him, his silhouette, proud and calm, outlined by firelight. The image would go viral within hours. But Rusty wouldn't see it. He was already walking again, into the wind, into the dark. Because the road didn't end here. The girl had been saved. But his journey wasn't finished yet. The sun was low when Rusty reached the hilltop. The town below looked smaller than he remembered, fences neater, trees taller, the distant train tracks rusted and quiet. But he recognized it. Every curve in the road, every shadow falling across the fields. This was home, or what used to be. His paws moved slower now, not from injury but hesitation. With every step down that familiar street, memory collided with the present. There was the tree he used to chase squirrels around. The fire hydrant Liam once painted blue, badly. The corner store that always smelled like old bread and rain. He passed neighbors he didn't recognize. They didn't recognize him either. No one called his name. He stopped in front of the house just as the wind picked up. It was still white, though the paint had peeled along the shutters. The front yard was trimmed differently now. A new car sat in the driveway. The swing Liam used to sit on was gone. Rusty approached the porch, paused silent on the stone path. His heart, if it could speak, would have said only one word, please. He stepped onto the porch and sat, waiting. The door didn't open. Behind the windows, he heard voices. A woman laughing. A baby crying softly. The house was full, but not with the life he remembered. Not with the boy who once whispered secrets into his ear and fed him toast crusts when no one was looking. Rusty let out a slow breath. Not a whine. Not a bark. Just breath. He lowered his body and rested his head on the welcome mat. The scent was different now. No trace of Liam. No trace of them. It had been too long. A delivery truck pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, box in hand, and noticed the dog on the porch. "Hey there, buddy," the man said kindly. "You lost?" Rusty didn't move. The man tilted his head. "You waiting for someone?" He looked at the collar, at the faded army badge, at the red ribbon worn thin from rain and time. Something about that mix of objects caught him. He pulled out his phone and took a photo, not sure why. The man knocked on the door. A woman opened it. "Oh, did you order something else?" she asked. "Package for you," he said, handing it over. Then nodded toward the dog. "You know him?" She looked down. Her expression softened but shook her head. "No, must be a stray. He's been sitting here a while." The woman hesitated. "He looks like no, never mind. I'm sorry." She closed the door. The man crouched beside Rusty, who was still staring at the door. "Sorry, pal," he said softly. "Whoever you're waiting for, maybe they're not here anymore." Rusty didn't move. After a while, the man stood, returned to his truck, and drove off. Dusk fell. Porch lights flickered on. Rusty stayed until the stars began to emerge. His ears twitched once at the sound of a train horn in the distance. Something tugged at him. Not memory, not loss, something else. He stood, turned, walked. Not with sadness, but with clarity. Because sometimes the place we come from is no longer the place we belong. Sometimes going home isn't about returning to a door, but knowing which doors are no longer yours. As he reached the end of the street, a girl riding a bike passed him. She slowed down, glancing at him. "You okay, Mr. Dog?" she asked. Rusty paused, then walked on. There were still stars above him, still earth beneath his feet, still a quiet wind pressing behind his shoulders like a whisper. And somewhere out there, a cabin light still flickered through the woods. A place with no fence, no leash, just one open door. The wind that followed Rusty down the mountain was gentler than the one that had chased him weeks ago. It no longer roared, no longer pushed against him. Now it carried pine and ash, the scent of firewood and earth. It wrapped around his worn frame like memory, not heavy, but full. The path was no longer clear. Fallen branches, new snow in patches, but Rusty remembered. He moved slower now. His limp had returned slightly with the cold, but this time he didn't fight it. It was a part of him, like the scar above his brow or the red ribbon that still clung to his collar, faded but unbroken. When the cabin came into view, he stopped. The porch light was on, and the man was there just as he had been before, sitting in the same old chair, a blanket across his knees, a chipped mug of coffee steaming in his hands. His beard had grown thicker, his eyes still sharp, still tired. He didn't look surprised. "I heard about what you did," he said as Rusty stepped out from the trees. Rusty stood at the edge of the clearing, unsure. "They showed your picture on the news," the man continued. "Said a stray saved a girl from a burning car. Some called you a ghost dog. A miracle. Said you disappeared before anyone could thank you." He took a sip of coffee, watching Rusty closely. "But I knew better. I knew where you'd go." Rusty took one step closer. The man nodded slowly. "I never locked the door. That was all." Rusty climbed the porch, every movement deliberate, not cautious chosen. He sat at the man's feet, then lay down with a soft thud, resting his chin across the worn leather boot that once carried stories of battlefields and loss. The fire from inside the cabin flickered in his eyes, casting gold across his weathered fur. The man reached down and gently scratched behind Rusty's ears. "Some of us weren't meant to be kept," he said. "Some of us were meant to be found." Rusty's tail thumped once against the wood. Inside, the cabin was exactly as he remembered. The folded blanket by the hearth, the empty dish in the corner, the quiet, the peace, and the space waiting, not owned, not caged, not claimed. Just waiting. They sat in silence as the sky turned purple and stars blinked awake overhead. An owl called in the distance. The trees whispered without urgency. Rusty closed his eyes. He wasn't chasing anymore. He wasn't waiting. He wasn't surviving. He was home. Thank you for staying with us through the end of this story. We hope Rusty's journey touched something deep inside you the way it touched us while telling it. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of loyalty, of silence, of the kind of love that never gives up, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. And we'd love to hear from you. What did this story mean to you? What part stayed with you the most? Leave a comment below, we read every one. Until next time, thank you for listening.